It's so nice to see y'all. I'm Dana Burkover. We're going to do a little more introductions later, but we can say our names to start, sure. Yeah, and we're excited to be here today talking about a study that our research lab did. This was one of those 2019 conference entries, that is now rolled over. So this was a work in progress then, but now it is completed. And so we're excited to share what we found with you, talk about it with you as well. Yeah, we'll introduce ourselves a little bit more, and then I'm going to talk about the background that led to this study, some of the research topics here, so social determinants of health and what that means for college students. And then we'll just talk more about the study in detail. So, the research questions, the method, the results, what that means for us as counselors and counselor educators. And then I think Janelle has, a discussion question for us to engage in. And then of course, throughout whenever, something I like about this conference is I feel like it's been very interactive. So if you ever have anything you want to share, any questions throughout, feel free. Okay, so like I said, my name is Dana. I'm a recent graduate of ECU just in December in their counselor education program. So that's exciting. And I'll be starting at University of Scranton in the fall.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Sola. I'm originally from Nigeria. I am a section of the counselor education program. I'm also in the equity research lab with Dana and Janelle, and we do a lot of research together. I'm currently a mental health specialist. I work with community mental health in DC, the Texas and DC. It's exciting work, and I'm glad to be here.
Morning, everyone. I am Janelle Jones. I am going into my 4th year of doctoral program solicitation at the University of Alabama. Again, work with the Equity Research Lab. I'm very excited to be here presenting for you guys today.
And then I do want to note 2 other authors on the paper, but they could not be here. One is Dr. Cabria Johnson. She's now with The Ohio State University. And then Dr. Michonne Borden. I'm not sure where she is actually.
Jackson.
Nice. Okay, yeah, and she's great too. But I wanted to, to give them their due credit since they did this project with us. And so then, what about you all? Are you counselors, counselor educators, students?
Counselor educator at the University of Iowa, associate professor.
Great.
Nice.
You said David Nice.
Nice.
Nice. So exciting.
Tony Suarez, I'm a counselor educator at Valparaiso University.
All right, great. Okay, awesome. So that's helpful. Get to know a little bit about you all.
So the Equity Research Lab, funny story, I got into the Equity Research Lab somewhere before I started my doctorate. Dr. Johnson, she was my ambassador. I reached out and said, hey, Dr. Johnson, I don't know a lot about this. What's going on? How do I get involved in research? She's like, come on in. And I went right in, and I realized that I got a lot of opportunities. It was very research focused. She wanted to know what my research interest was, which is very much my master's in mental health and rehabilitation counseling. So I told her I'd be very much interested in disability studies, and she was like, okay, come in, you can do this, you can do that. And Equity Research Lab has given me a reason to want to do more research, and it gives everyone what they need to be successful. That's the major aim of Equity Research Lab, regardless of where you're from. We have people from Virginia Commonwealth University, from
University of Alabama.
It's everywhere. And then we connect and we network from different universities. It's just huge. And I think it's a research lab that we're asking everyone to come be a part of, regardless of where you are, because it gives us the opportunity to focus on research as well as that. So you can come join us.
Yeah, yes. And we did want to give, the ERL a shout out because it is, Dr. Johnson's baby, so to speak. And so you can check it out online if you want to see some more of the projects we've done. Oh, that was hard to see on my screen. Sorry. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about social determinants of health. That's, are any of you familiar? Do you do any work around social determinants of health? It's kind of new in the counseling field, I would say. Okay. Yeah, I think that this is
school counseling is parallel.
Yes. No, right. I don't think yeah, we don't use this language. I think it's more from public health. And so I think it's good for counselors just to talk about and be aware of, because it kind of lets us be able to really connect with other professionals when we're working interprofessionally and things. So this was something new for me from working with Dr. Johnson in the ERL. And I find it really relevant for our work as counselors because social determinants of health are just, they're those conditions, the environments that we live in. So where we are born, we live, we learn, we work, we play, we worship, where we age. And it affects a wide range of things with our health, with our functioning, with our quality of life, and then also with risk as well. So within Healthy People, which actually is now, so it was Healthy People 2020 is what they called it, but now actually we're on 2030, which is crazy because they plan it for the future. But this is, through the US government, and they've kind of grouped social determinants of health into these 5 sectors. So economic stability, our education, our social community context, health and healthcare, and our built environment. And college students are not immune from experiencing adversity in any of these 5 areas. And so that's why we thought this research study was important. What else would I say? So there is emerging social, so like I said, this is kind of a new thing within counseling, but there is emerging social determinants of health research with college students that does highlight the relationship between some of these areas. We don't have research on all of them, and how that influences college students' academic outcomes, their mental health, and to a lesser degree, sometimes there's some studies on the connection to physical health. Often though, those studies are looking at just one single component of social determinants of health. So looking at specifically food insecurity, that's a really big one in the research right now surrounding college students. Okay, so I kind of talked about it here. So let's see. So a lot of people think that college students are at an advantage when it comes to the impacts of social determinants of health on their general and mental health. I think sometimes people believe that everyone who is in college is privileged in all areas of their life, and we're finding that that is really not true. They're definitely not protected from having social determinants of health needs. Some people think that actually with college students, you could be more at risk for having some of these unmet social determinants of health needs because of their transitional instability, right? So this instability is, there's a lot of changes in this time of your life. There's a lot of uncertainty related to the future, with work, college, partnering, where you're gonna live, if you have employment while you're in college. So these are very real things that we're seeing in our college student population. So financial stress, is the inability to be able to meet your own financial obligations. We're finding that college students are worrying about money and student loan debt. I can certainly relate to that. And then, like I said, there's been a lot of emerging research on food insecurity, which is the availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods, or the ability to acquire acceptable foods in socially acceptable ways. And that is very limited or uncertain for a lot of college students. And like I said, that's a growing area of research. Let's see. There's a lot of articles out there on that. I don't think I have any of the statistics here, but for housing insecurity and housing instability, in one study, Goldrick, Rab et al. Found that half of the student participants had been experiencing housing insecurity. Around 14% of their students were homeless. In another study that focused on urban college students, housing instability was related to lower class attendance, lower performance, more adjustment issues. And we believed, and we hadn't seen this in the literature, but with college students necessarily, but in other studies surrounding housing insecurity, we believe that also includes poor quality housing as well. So you might have a roof over your head, but it might not be a safe place to live, right? And then, so how is this connected, to mental health and general health is really what we're interested in, in our study and as counselors. And so our definition, health is just this it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. It's not merely the absence of disease. I feel like that's pretty strong to our professional identity as counselors, right? And mental health and just general health are very intertwined, of course. All right.
So the theory that was used for this study to analyze this biosocial model, and this is used just because it gives us an holistic approach to looking into the biological aspect, the psychological wellness. And this was developed as an alternative to understanding all of this, because just like she said, Dana said, sometimes we're focused on one aspect. Is it the biological aspect or the psychological aspect or the social and environmental factor? We're not really looking at this as a holistic approach to what could impact the health and mental health, general health of college students. And this is important because depression rise among college students and their unmet social determinants of health is related to this social factor. So the rise in depression and all of the social determinants of health that are not met continues to impact their general health, their mental health. This module allows us to investigate potential influence of cumulative stresses of general health. So not just one, but accumulative stresses that come together to impact general health. This was figured out through the self-report general health assessment score, and then mental health, which is operationalized through depression severity. So looking at these different aspects, we're able to say, hey, okay, what are all the things that come together to impact the general health? And understanding the relationship between social determinants of health, such as food insecurity, housing stability, ability status, all of these things, understanding the relationship between this and general mental health outcomes for college students is unique. Because it contributes to how we can help. If I don't understand all of these other aspects of you, I don't understand your food insecurity and your homelessness, and you're not sharing that with me, or I have not assessed that, right? And you just come in and I think, hey, this person has depression, or this person has bipolar disorder, or this person has all of these psychological factors that we're asked to assess. If I'm not looking at other aspects of you, then I'm not able to provide you with an appropriate intervention. I'm not able to provide you with prevention efforts. So this is important, and this module helps us to assess all around so we can better provide the clients that we serve and college students with appropriate interventions and prevention efforts.
So one of the things that we're seeing in the research is that typically when social determinants of health are being discussed in relation to depression, they're only mentioning one factor of social determinants of health. So they're saying, oh, it's directly this houselessness, it's directly this food insecurity, as opposed to looking at the combination and multiple factors. And also typically biological factors, one's health and self-perceived health hasn't been factored into that either. So when we were engaging in this study and the study was created, we wanted to see how all those factors combine and create this influence on depression. So it's not just this factor, social determinants of health, or how you feel physically, but like all of it together. How we bring this together to figure out how it is impacting your depression overall. So looking into some of our research questions, these are the questions that we asked when we were starting this study and came up with this group, and it was wonderful to ask. So we were thinking, what are some of the independent relationships between our cumulative social determinants of health needs, depression severity, and self-assessed general health? So how, again, what is the combination of these things? How do they begin to impact, and how do we kind of separate them out as individuals? And then bringing them together, what factors predict the likelihood that respondents will report mild, moderate, or severe depression, right? So we wanted to see kind of where does that land to on these scales, right, of depression. So we had hypotheses going alongside our research questions. First, we were thinking that as the social determinant of health needs increase, depression severity would also increase, right? So it has like a positive correlation that way. Secondly, the cumulative indicators of social determinants of health as they increase the general health, your self-assessed general health would also decrease, right? So as your needs are starting to go up, and you don't have these things, you're saying my health is going down, that type of thing. And then with our second research question, hypothesis 3, we're thinking together or combine lower general health as well as unmet needs would then, of course, predict depression, the presence of depression, whether it's mild, moderate, or severe. And then we also noted that the severity of the depression would increase if you had both or a combination of a marginalized identity, increased cumulative social health needs, as well as lower general health. So then you add in that factor of the marginalization piece, that fourth hypothesis.
Yeah. And we specifically say social determinants of health needs because there are positive social determinants of health too, right? And I think that sometimes that gets a little like twisted in the literature, but there's certainly supportive factors as well. But we're looking at more adverse ones in this study. This is kind of what you just explained, but
yes. So this
here's
is
a visual.
that's a visual
That I added in
you
here.
just explain, right? And so again, this is going along with the original purpose of the research. How do the social and environmental factors, as well as this biological factor of self-assessed health, impact the psychological factor of depression?
Yeah. Okay. So what we did specifically for this study, it was non-experimental correlational research. We had over 300 participants, which was great, from 2 different universities. Both were R1s and urban universities who participated in the study. We did have, as is a lot in undergraduate research, predominantly girl participants. I feel like that happens a lot. Most were undergraduate, full-time students, and in that more like traditional college age, so 18 to 24. About half of the sample identified as white. We had 18% of the students identified as Black, 12% as multiracial, 6% as Asian, 6% as Latinx, and then less than 1% as either Native American, Alaskan, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander. So it was a relatively diverse sample, I would say, in terms of race ethnicity. So the measures that were used for social determinants of health, we modified a version of the Accountable Health Communities health-related social needs screening tool. So if you're looking for a social determinants of health screening tool, this one is pretty short and pretty easy to give. So if you're looking for something, you know, to talk to your students about or to use in your practice, there's many out there, and this is the one that we chose. And so we called this cumulative indicators of social determinants of health. And then for depression, we use PHQ-9, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with. And then for self-reported health, we actually found the BRFSS1, and that is used not in the census, but in one of those like phone surveys they give to everyone. But anyways, it's a one item for self-reported health that actually has really good, let's see, what do we call that? Oh, it's been like a highly regarded predictor of general health. So that one item has actually been used in a lot of studies. So that's really interesting. So it's a single item, and responses are given on a 5-point Likert scale where you're self-assessing your health from poor to excellent. And we reverse coded it for the present study. But yeah, this one item's been pretty effective in predicting adverse physical and mental health outcomes. And I probably should have said what the items were on that. Let me see if I have it on a future slide. I don't, so I'll let you all know. So on the AHCN, which is where we were like assessing for these social determinants of health needs, 5 items on that. They're dichotomous, yes or no. The first one's for food insecurity. So I worry about having enough to eat. The next one's housing instability. I do not have a steady place to live. Then we have hazardous living conditions. The housing where I live has bugs, mold, broken appliances, and or no heat or cooling system. The fourth one is finances. I worry about student loan debt. And the 5th one's also about finances, but it's I worry about not having enough money to pay my bills. So those were the social determinants of health indicators. In case you were curious, this is what we solve for the amount of cumulative indicators of social determinants of health need within this sample specifically. So let's see. So about 23% of the sample responded, they had no needs there. 20% had 1, 44% had 2, and then 9% had 3, about 2% had 4, and then less than 1% had all 5 of those social determinants of health needs. Okay. So we'll show you our results, but in case you were curious for the data analysis, we used ANOVAs to look at that relationship between the social determinants of health needs and then their self-assessed general health, their depression severity. We use a multiple regression for looking at the variance once they had by how many indicators they had. And then we used regression for looking at those factors we talked about earlier to predict whether a participant would have mild, moderate, or severe depression. All right. Woo. It's a mouthful. I do love quantitative studies, though. I think it's really fun. All right. So as far as the results, so what did we find? So I guess I should say, like, unfortunately, because, you know, we don't, of course, want anyone, right, to have depression, but we did find that there was a statistically significant group or difference, excuse me, in depression severity by the 4 social determinants of health need groups. So that is by how many they reported. So let's see. And the effect size was 0.16. So I know that, like, technically you can't say it means 16% of the variance was because of that, but that's kind of like a shorthand way of saying it. So that's what we found in this first one. So there was a significant difference in your depression severity for people that reported 0 health needs and 2. There was a significant difference between those who had none and those who had 3 or more. And there was a significant difference between those who had 1 need and those who had 3 or more. But there was no, oh no, there actually was on this one. Sorry, I'm thinking to another one. There was also a significant difference between having 2 or 3 or more. So basically, and we also saw that within these group means that unfortunately each group met the criteria for mild to moderate depression severity. And also based on those means, depression severity increases as your number of social determinants of health needs increase. Yeah. That's what we found for our first one. So our second one here, this is where we were looking at those indicators of social determinants of health and then self-assessed general health. So just how do they feel about their health in general? And this one too was significant. The effect size for this one was 0.076, so like 7% of the variance. So when we looked at the post hoc comparisons, the difference was between having 0 of those needs or having 3 or more. That was the only one that actually had this significant difference when it comes to your self-assessed general health. But if you look at the means, again, as those needs increase, we're seeing there are decreases in their perceived general health, unfortunately. All right, so the third one was when we were trying to figure out what factors predict the likelihood that, that the participants will report mild, moderate, or severe depression. And so for this one, so let's see. So we found that out of the 2 independent variables, general health actually made the largest unique contribution for that. Although cumulative indicators of social determinants of health also made a statistically significant contribution to explaining that depression severity. And so when we looked at it more closely, we saw that as those social health needs increased by 1 standard deviation, depression severity score will increase by 0.22. So that's kind of high. And then we saw as perceived general health scores decreased, depression severity increased by 0.37. All right, last one was looking at what factors predict the likelihood that respondents are going to report mild, moderate, or severe depression, but these were different independent variables we put in. We put in race and sexual orientation as well. Let's see. Trying to get to the actual results here. Okay, so let's see. Overall effects of general health, cumulative indicators of social determinants of health, and sexuality, those were all statistically significant in the model, but race and ethnicity was not. And that wasn't something that we actually expected because based on the literature, that's why we put that variable in there. So that was very interesting, but race was not a predictor when we're accounting for these other things for your level of depression severity.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure.
So on your breakdown of participants, is that reflective of the general student population of the schools that you were? Because I'm wondering about that finding as well.
I'm gonna go back. That's a great question.
Weren't showing that relationship with depression, or at least a different. Was that 55, 18, so on? Was that reflective of the general student population of those?
Good question. So I do know because out of the 2 schools, one of them was the one I was working at, and this is actually reflective because I do know that it is it's about 50% of our student body was like historically underrepresented groups, and about 50% or so were white students. So in that sense, for my school it was, but I actually cannot speak to the other schools, so that's a good question.
Yeah, I was just thinking that you might obtain different results at a school that is historically white,
right?
Representation of white students,
right?
minority students might experience more.
Right. Certainly, you know what? Yeah, and I can speak though, I do know that the other school is, I wouldn't say it's predominantly white. I think it's also a pretty diverse school as well. So that's true. I mean, I'm certain, certainly that could have an impact for sure.
Even when seeing these percentages from my experiences and my institution, it was like 18%.
Yeah.
That's wild, because I had like 4% at my school, right? And so
Right.
to even have 18% of participants
Mhm.
to be in the study, right? It's like
Yeah.
a large number to see.
Yes, that is true. And I will say, like, also too, at the schools, like, or I know at least at the school I worked at, it's like 33% of the population are first generation college students as well. So there's a lot of support for first generation college students also. So which is great. But I wonder, if maybe that has an influence as well. Great thoughts and question.
Yeah, and spoken a lot about, and this study just built on prior research about SDOH, and that SDOH stresses can contribute to adverse outcomes for both general and mental health for college students, and this is just building up on that. The study utilized the theoretical tenets of the psychosocial model, like I said earlier on, to understand all of those cumulative indicators of SDOH. So cumulative indicators, looking at social and environmental factors, and then self-reported general health, looking at biological factors, and how this is related to depression severity. So psychological factors, how is all of these other things impacting and influencing the outcome of the psychological factors of college students. And Dana went ahead and told us how this was done and the assessments that were done to get that. And our study found out that psychosocial factors, such as SDO stresses, rarely occur in isolation. And that's what we're seeing, because prior research focused on one or the other. Is it homelessness, or is it food insecurity? Food insecurity, or is it all of this other factors?
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's so many. Yeah, transportation. You have transportation is one. Yeah.
Finance.
Yes.
Right. Is it that? But this is looking at everything together. So your finances, your economic stability, your ability status, your health, all of that is looking at that, and we're realizing that it doesn't occur in isolation. And the more stresses you have, the more cumulative impact you encounter. Cumulative impact of stresses increase self-assess general health and increase depression, anxiety. And this is very much related to the hypothesis one, like she said. The more social determinants of health needs increases, depression severity increases as well. And then the more indicators of social determinants of health needs increases, general health decreases. Our study also shows that the more cumulative SCI and SDH increases, depression severity increases, like I said. And this is specifically for students, college students who experience two or more. So you can experience one and you have depression could still happen, but the more you have, the higher the severity, the more severe your case would be as it relates to the mental health conditions that you might begin to experience. And also we found out that students who experience CISDH have statistically significant higher levels of depression compared to students who have no CISDH. So we realized with more unmet needs, students rate their health lower. So the more my needs are not met, the lower my health, the lower I'll rate my health. And then we talked about hypothesis 3 and 4, looked at no depression, mild to moderate depression, and then moderate to severe depression. And what we realized is those who reported mild to moderate depression experienced, they reported poor health. So if I have mild to moderate, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to self-report poor health. And then from moderate to severe, they reported poorer health. So the more higher depression, the less, and the more decrease the experience with their general health. Using multiple regression to look at the relationship, we found that 37% of the variance of depression can be explained by low perception of general health and increased social needs. And what this is telling us is social determinants of health, cumulative social determinants of health, and general health outcomes are statistically significant, and they're very much related to depression outcomes.
Yeah, and I think, we talk about how we're seeing increased rates of like depression and anxiety in our college students. Our counseling centers are overwhelmed, right? They can't keep up with the need that's there. When I was, presenting my qualitative study yesterday, just like, talking to college women about how they're like, I can't even be seen at my college counseling center. Like they have to refer out, like they just don't have enough resources. And so it's really important to know, like, these social determinants of health are having a huge impact on this as well. And so that's important for us to remember as counselors too. So when we are able to see these clients, we have our ways in counseling that, we our different theories and our techniques and the ways that we approach working with people with depression. But if we can do all that with them, we can work on their mindfulness, we can help them with coping skills. But if they go home and there's no food in the fridge, that plays a huge role. And so what can colleges do both preventatively and in response to learning about social determinants of health needs? I don't know if it's like this across the board, but we have the Rams food pantry at VCU. So our students that do have food insecurity can go there and get food and things, because we are seeing that there are these needs in our student populations. And if we ignore social determinants of health, we're probably not going to be able to really address the issue. I do know a lot of counselors have perceptions, this is what social workers do, right? This isn't what I do as a counselor, but there are ways that you can help your clients with this without necessarily being a social worker. So there's a website, it was called Aunt Bertha. I believe it's called findhelp.org now. And you can put in your zip code of where you live, and you can search by the different categories of social determinants of health needs. So you can find people that can help you get transportation, childcare, find employment, find housing or shelters if you need them, places you can get free clothes if you need that. So if you have a client who's struggling with this, or students when you're teaching, counselor educators too, you can refer them to this website even, and it's a way that you can help them still address these things within, even if you don't feel like it's within your scope of practice, or where to send them exactly, like that's a way that you can find it together, and they can even call the helpline too, but it's really user friendly and really easy to search on.
Even to that point, I think from my experience having worked at University of Alabama Counseling Center, we don't assess for social determinants of health on our intake, right? We're not asking, do you have a place to sleep tonight? Do you have food in the refrigerator when you go home? Did you have a way to even get to my office? Do you have, the economic resources to pay your bills, let alone now this counseling fee, right? So we don't ask those things. And from my own experience of having a student who didn't necessarily have a lot of clothing options, of course, I'm like, okay, well, we have this campus closet, and you can go and get these clothes. And with that, she came back and she said, they don't have clothes in my size. So now what? Right? And so it was like, okay, well, I need to identify other resources. And I wish I had that website with that counselor. So I was like, okay, let me get places that have low cost or free clothing for you, right? And I'm just like, okay. In the back of your mind, you're like, we know Goodwill, we know Salvation Army, we know a couple of resources, but even those, other side of town, do you have a way to get to those, right? So I thought it was very interesting, like that point, because we don't assess, we don't engage in those conversations in intake, and so the student could be struggling with this all along, and we never ask those questions to find out.
Yeah, and this just leads to the implication of health. Talking about college mental health, providers should consider the impact of social health needs when developing comprehensive treatment programs for college students. And I think you all just said a lot about that, because you have clients coming, you have college students coming to your session, and the first thing you think is, hey, I want to assess your psychological factor, as opposed to what are the other things. And I work in community mentoring as a therapist, and I've come to realize that it's a lot more than you see. It's a lot more than this person sitting across from you and showing the symptoms of depression or anxiety. And it's so easy to go in and say, hey, this is generalized anxiety, and this is bipolar, and this is, as opposed to, hey, what's going on at home? And someone will tell you, I don't have a home. Okay, let's start, right? So housing instability will come up when you begin to assess for them before even developing a comprehensive treatment program. For students, having to understand what are these social health needs that these students need, and how can I have an understanding of that before I even develop any treatment program at all. And then using international classified, the ICD-10 code, it's easy for us to just look up and ignore the Z codes or the V codes that talk about homelessness and housing instability and food insecurity. So many people forget that. And even relationship problems. If you look through your Z codes and your V codes, they're there. And as a mental health person or as a college counselor, it's important for you to go down there and indicate those things. My student is experiencing relationships. My student is experiencing food instability. My student is experiencing this, so that way, whoever is coming in can look at this as an holistic approach, and then you can create a holistic treatment plan as opposed to just looking at one aspect or just the psychological aspect. Dana said a lot of people think, hey, this is social work. I'm not a case manager. I'm not going to manage a case. I'm not a social worker. I'm not going to provide you with resources. How about understanding that I know I can't really do this without providing resources? Or I should connect you with someone who's going to provide you with resources, because I don't really have access to that. So it's important that we put these things in our notes and we put these things together while we're trying to create a comprehensive treatment plan or treatment program for the students that we serve. Health promotion and prevention efforts can also incorporate universal screening for social determinants of health needs for college students. And I think Dana mentioned that as well. What do I need to assess first, right? I'm just not going to assess, hey, tell me the severity of your symptom as a result of depression. Tell me the frequency and duration of all of the symptoms as it relates to depression or to anxiety or to bipolar or to all of this other diagnoses that we're quick to put down, right? How about I assess for food? How about I assess for money, right? How about I assess for where you lay your head at night? How do I assess for that? It's important that we promote that, because when we promote that, then we can create prevention efforts as well as health promotion for the college students that we serve. And then considering the relationship between unmet social determinants of health needs and general and mental health, I think it's very important to assess all students as a preventative measure. Just because you look good and you dress well doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to do something, right? So if I assess for you, as well as every other person, number one, it removes the stigma. Why am I the only person being addressed? Is it because I look like I should be addressed? Or everyone is getting assessed so we can properly provide you with the help. And I went to a session yesterday where someone mentioned other students anonymous tipping, where someone else can see a student and say, hey, I don't have to say who I am, but I'm concerned about this person. You don't have to say it, but be able to have access to college counselors and to faculty persons to be able to share this thing so we can provide help for all of the college students that we serve.
Well, I would just say too, it can seem really overwhelming. I think a lot of people so I was a school counselor, so I can speak to this. Like, it can seem really overwhelming to do universal screening because you're like, if I find out about it, then I have to do something about it, right? So Dr. Johnson, doing this study, she was able to show those results to VCU and be like, look, there's a lot of this out there. Let's figure out a way that we can do this in a feasible manner. So it was like, as far as universal screening, VCU luckily did have a lot of resources for students, like the food pantry and things like that. We also looked up local ones in the Richmond area. And so students were able to answer these 5 questions online. And if they responded like, yes, I have this need, I'm experiencing this, then it would take them to another link, or like a window would pop up that would show all those resources, both on campus and in the area. And then of course, they're invited to go to the counseling center as well, if needed. But so that was a way to make it a little more manageable, but also still hopefully be preventative. Because definitely the students, they have these social determinants of health needs, so.
Wrap up the education, college mental health professionals, medical providers, and health prevention specialists can provide professional development training to students, resident health advisors, faculty, and other college staff and institute impacts on student general health, mental health, and academic outcomes. If they understand, if someone is coming around to say, hey, this is what I do, this is my job, and this is what you can do, this is how you can help without getting overwhelmed, it's like taking away that fear from, I can do it all by myself. I have too much to do. I'm a resident all advisor. Why do I have to do this, right? But having understanding and teaching and providing help as well as resources to these individuals will help them better serve college students. So doing that as mental health professionals, medical providers, and just removing the idea of it has to be this person's job. as opposed to it's all of our jobs. We're all here to support the students, and we all have to work together to support the students. That would help our resident hall advisors, faculty members, and college staff members to provide the help that needs a student. And someone also said something at one of the sessions that I attended about, I'm not sure if it was your session, Dina, about students going to faculty members first before they even go to counseling. Before they go to the counseling center, they're probably going to talk to their faculty advisor. And if the faculty advisor does not have the resources to say, hey, this is, I can provide you with this, and it's difficult because this person probably gets to the college counseling center and you're like, oh, the college counselor is booked for 2 weeks, right? So having to provide that information would also help bridge that gap of students going out and just not getting the help that they need. And lastly, trainings and resources can be provided online, like Dana said. We see there are a lot of, you complete the assessment and then you get taken to a resource center where you can just go ahead and say, hey, this is what I can use, and this can be helpful to me, which increases accessibility and has been shown in research to often be preferred by college students. Because sometimes there's ego to it as well as a college student, right? Hey, I'm in college, I'm supposed to be better, I'm supposed to, know more and do more, but I still have needs, and these needs to be taken care of. So probably online training and resources being provided to students would also help them, keep that anonymous status and also provide them with the help that they need.
We're trying to get grant money too, to have people that are on deck to talk about students if they need it, but it's a work in progress.
I love that piece about making sure that you, either as an advisor, as a faculty member, as someone in a supportive community, are available to students. Because when I worked at the counseling center, it was like if students make an appointment in August, the earliest we can get to you was like mid-September, right? So you're waiting all this time, and like if you're experiencing housing, that's 6 weeks of you not being able to be connected, you not being able to assist you with finding resources to eradicate that, right? Or figure out how to get you to a village, right? So it's essential for the communal care, right? And everyone to kind of help where they can, how they can. And so for that last piece, Dana, where are we on time?
We are out of time.
Okay, cool. So,
But you can tell them what you were
I
going
was
to do.
like,
You're
I'm
wonderful.
and then you'll have access to these slides. So that last piece.
It could even be
is-
something fun to do with your own students.
with
We
your
want to
own
talk
students, yeah,
about.
you could workshop it, right?
social
Or with
terms
your
of health.
colleagues, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to do in that piece of students preferring online interaction, right? Because of course, now that we're in Zoom, you can like change your name or change your picture, so students don't have to self-identify in those spaces of having these experiences or issues or less access to some of their needs. You can create a training to address social determinants of health and its impact on depression as well as physical health as well. So what I was gonna have you all do in a group of 2 or 3, and thank you for being present, and those that are online with us as well. We're gonna have you guys get into groups and kind of discuss like, how would you create this training? What would that look like? What are some of the topics you would touch on? Even as detailed as like, what platform would you use? So everyone uses Zoom, but like, is that something that's useful for training settings and things like that? Would you use breakout rooms? How would you go about touching on these various points of the ways that one's self-perceived physical health as well as social determinants of health needs are impacting their psychological experiences and depression within college settings? So we're just gonna have you guys workshop and discuss what that would look like in a training. And again, this is something that you can take back to your own colleagues or do within your own classrooms and talk to your students about how do we address this within our communities and within our roles. So we hope that you'll access our slides through the app and go home and try this.
And on our Equity Research Lab site, we actually do have a professional training for counselors on social determinants of health, and it has on there different screenings you can use and ways that you could talk about it and like broach the subject and stuff. And we even go by different types of counselors, so school counselors, clinical mental health, and counselor educators. So that's available for the public as well. Yeah, thank you so much.